right. Welcome everyone to another episode of the Cosmic Matrix podcast with your host Bernhard Ganther this time. And today I have a very special guest, astrologer Michael Lutin. And Michael and I have known each other already for over 10 years. And I've got my first reading from him before my Uranus opposition. And we've stayed in contact ever since because Michael is aware of many, many other things from a very much deeper perspective and has a very unique approach to astrology as well, which I very appreciate. You can find him at michaellutin.com, and he lectures all over the world. He's given workshops all over the world. He's done astrology for many decades. He's written a few books as well, which I found very insightful. Some of them was Sunshine's The Astrology of Being Happy. It's about the nodes. Made in Heaven, The Astrology of Why People You're Attracted to Eventually Drive You Crazy and What You Can Do About It. I like this one as well. And Childhood Rising, The Astrology of Your Mother, Your Father, and You. And I think he's working on a new book as well right now. Welcome to the show, Michael.
Well, it's really great to get a chance finally to talk about all the things we talk about all the time.
Exactly, behind the scenes. So yeah, we have much to talk about and get into. So before we dive into more deeper topics, I'm just curious about, how you got into astrology and your unique approach to astrology. Because every astrology has their own approach.
I think it's important to say that right up front because everybody does have a point of view and everybody has a valid approach to it. And so many people have so many different views of it. And I think that what I've developed over the last years since I got into this in the end of the 60s and I was into it actually before when I was a little kid. There was a lot of aspects of what I do now that were involved when I was really a child. But it's important to say that right up front that any system that I have encountered, whether it's ancient astrology or Vedic astrology, they all have a certain position and a perspective that I totally have to accept and respect, but I don't pursue every possible end. When you get into astrology in the beginning, it's important to check everything out, all the systems. It's very important, but eventually you're going to find your area that you are attracted to and that resonates for you. I started out really with just Eastern philosophy and reading. I spent about 3 years studying the Tibetan Book of the Dead. I don't even know why. It just tells you what kind of a fun guy I am. But I spent about 3 years reading just that book. I was working on a novel at the time, but I found very informative and instructive and probably correct in terms of living. And from that, I drew to other aspects of Eastern thought, and then that took me into astrology, and I studied Western astrology, which I practice now. And at one point I realized that I needed other methods to describe not only how the astrology and the planets affected people, but how the people were affected by the planets and by how the people responded. It wasn't enough to say you have this because your moon is here or your Mars is there. That was diagnostically correct, but it didn't promote any healing. It was diagnostically, yes, very amazing. When you get into astrology, you realize, how did you know that? Even with the nodes of the moon, when I was first studying, I remember staring at the page and thinking, how do they know that? So it's a mind-blowing experience to have your chart done in the beginning, but I've come to realize that one session is not nearly enough. When you see an astrologer and the astrologer resonates with you, you're beginning a relationship, a communication with that person. And that's when I got involved in psychotherapy, involved in the method that I am dealing with now, which is, and I've been working on it for many, many years, and that is called communicative psychoanalytic psychotherapy. It's a big mouthful, but it's about unconscious communication and how valuable astrology can be in developing your abilities for unconscious communication. And it's on that level that healing can really happen.
Interesting.
So there.
Yeah. No, beautiful. I remember that when you gave me my first reading, I don't even know how I came across your old website, the old HTML website back in those days.
By the way, I love that
That was
website.
awesome. That's why actually very unique, because
And
it felt
everybody
like you
said,
almost
get
like,
rid of it. Get rid of
no,
Dreamweaver. It's
because I love
it's
it
so
because
90s. It's so
no, no.
90s. I love that.
I love it because you also didn't give a shit, because you're an excellent astrologer. I was also impressed how accurate even just your sun sign astrology, like the little updates you have here and there, were very accurate through your own
Right.
unique system. But then eventually I contacted you for a reading. I remember you were in LA. By the way, Michael is based in New York. You can contact him for in-house sessions there, but he also does it over long distance. I remember you were in LA. That was before my Uranus opposition, almost 10
Yes,
years
I
ago.
remember that.
And I came by for a personal reading. And that's what I experienced, like your approach, like, because most people, I feel, even myself back then, they're going, always going to to an astrologer for the same topics. Like, what about my job, my love, my relationships? Tell me something good must happen, please. Right? You didn't give me that at all. You also have your own unique of humor. And then also you brought, and that was really profound for me, that psychological aspect, and really reflected back to me deeper issues I needed to look within me, and didn't even talk in this astrology jargon, right? But used it in a more practical way to really take me the responsibility for myself, for my own inner healing, right? And you can see also in an astrology chart, and that's always confounded me, the childhood wounding is even in the chart, right, so to speak. So that always kind of fascinates me, like, okay, what is the paradox between free will and predestination and all of that.
Why did you incarnate with those parents?
Exactly.
Why did you choose that? Was it a random act? Whatever it is, that's the story you came in on, and that's the horse you have to ride, with all aspects of it. And those are the people that you have to learn from, and those are the people you have to teach.
Yeah.
So that's what happens and that's why you're incarnated there, because you have to learn from those people and teach them a lot. And that's what I always make a joke, that you can't really forgive your parents as you screw up your own kids, because that's when you understand really how hard it is to be a parent and to raise kids. But the real thing is that's the story you came in on, and that I think that's more valuable in the long run than telling people they have Neptune here or Venus there, because it's a wonderful diagnostic tool, but it doesn't heal anything. So sometimes I forget to use astrology in the reading. Of course, I do everything in my head beforehand. I work before that, but I don't always mention the planets. So sometimes people will say, "Did you do my chart at all?" And I think because we're just having a conversation about the real issues of their life.
Yeah. No, I really appreciate that. And on that note, it's interesting because, yeah, I say it's a diagnostic tool, and it's very mathematical and left brain. But the true art of astrology, even in the ancient times, it's a psychic art as well. You need to have a certain ability and certain intuition to read a chart, because I'm really fascinated. I realized, like, I have some very basic astrology knowledge, but it's hard for me to get the bigger picture when I look at the chart, how everything interacts, because it's easy to learn the book definitions of, this is what Moon in Cancer means, Venus in Scorpio, whatever. But to see how it all functions together goes beyond the logical mind, right?
Every horoscope has a mystery, like a murder mystery, but not a murder mystery. It's like a mystery. Every horoscope. What I try to do in my work before the person comes is to discover the mystery, not to answer it. It's not my job. It's not my life. They have to do it. But if I can help them identify the mysterious things that don't fit together, it's a puzzle. If they can identify the puzzle, they're more likely to be able to embrace it without trying to think they have to find an answer to it. It's embracing the puzzle that makes people much more happy in their life than trying to be something that they think they should be. And that's the great thing about astrology. It defines behavior, and our destinies is very different from each other. If we can identify that and embrace it, we're really way ahead of the game. But that's the way I really see it now, is if I can help them identify that, and then they recognize their recurring patterns, their obsessions, their unconscious repetitions. Those are the things that give people humor about the crazy things that they do.
Yeah.
And that's what we all need.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's true. Now, I really found it's really also a great tool for anybody to learn about yourself, a basic tool to gain self-knowledge, like you mentioned before, to gain self-awareness, self-acceptance, acceptance of your parents. So you realize you cannot blame anyone anymore. It's just your journey you're on. So it helps to raise this awareness. But I also address, astrology has become so popular nowadays, and on the internet, you can put in your chart and everywhere. Where do you see the quote unquote limitations of astrology, where people almost abuse it, where they just blame, oh, I have this, and my planet is in this and that, and they just blame, they just, are stuck in the diagnostic realm, but don't take any responsibility.
Like everything else, people are at a different level of inquiry for whatever their life is about. You can, like an automobile, for example. Some people like an automobile because it's red and it has flashy wheels. Some people say, no, I really want to know more about this, why this car works. And then some people become an expert at the mechanics of developing transportation. So although I do have to roll my eyes a little bit sometimes when I hear people say things about astrology or various elements of their chart, it's a gradient. It's not something that's why I realize now people need to really go into a relationship with an astrologer that helps them actually develop the relationship itself, which is therapeutic. That's what's therapeutic. But people think that they're going to go to astrology like they're going to get their hair done. Well, they do, because I haven't had my horoscope done. And then some people go to astrologer after astrologer after astrologer after astrologer. Why do they do that? They do that because something didn't happen. That's the real reason. Because once you find somebody that you can connect with and go deeper with on all your issues, you don't need a lot of other astrologers. I mean, there's a different type. If you want to do horary astrologer or electional to time events, that's different. But if you're just pursuing your life on the things that people really like, health, marriage, career, those things, it's much better to be with somebody who understands you and recognizes you and validates you. It's not to make the astrologers rich, believe me, but it really is an opportunity to explore a relationship that opens the doors of perception to you. But I agree. I mean, people are at all different levels. People are, and I knew somebody once, I had a student. She was really wonderful. She was learning and she was terrific at what she knew, but she didn't know how to put the thing together, just the way you're saying. She didn't know exactly how to do that. So what she would do, if somebody would call her, because they knew at work she was, for her job that she was doing astrology, what she used to do is look up all of the aspects of the person that she calculated and put little notes in the book and put little pieces of paper in the areas of the book that explained it. And when the person came, she would open the book and read all those things to them. She was embarrassed to admit that to me, but I thought, why not? You're showing people what you know, and you're not trying to tell them you know more than you know. I thought that was a wonderful way to open your friends and relatives to astrology in a way that you were familiar. I decided to go as deeply as I could in it. And, so I had to develop a different aspect of communication and interpretation.
That's interesting. That reminds me, what do you feel of when we talk about the limitation of astrology, that is a system that you cannot maybe possibly see everything in one person, just in one chart, because we are, what I say, multidimensional beings. There's so much happening, right? Even maybe beyond the planets. But also in terms of what I call level of being, level of awareness, or your spiritual evolution, that some affected more mechanically by the planets, and there's a notion of, you study various occult teachings or esoteric spiritual teachings that you're able to transcend your natal chart to a degree, so the transits don't have an effect on you, like for the mass, like compared to the masses, for example. Have you noticed that at all
You've
in
just said
cases?
so much in that one little minute. I try to keep up with you, but sometimes
Yeah.
it's hard because in 3 sentences you could be way out there, and I'm trying to catch up with you. But I will say that this is what I believe.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, as new planets are discovered, new dimensions of consciousness rise to the surface.
Mm.
So now we have Haumea, we have Makemake, we have Sedna, we have Eris. Something is happening to consciousness in the last 20 years as these planets are being acknowledged. Plus, extrasolar planets are being discovered. That brings our consciousness, that stretches our consciousness even further. So the more we are products of incarnation. So the more planets that are discovered, the more we have to raise our level of behavior to meet those specifications. That's not to say that it's not very difficult, because when planets are first discovered, behavior is exhibited probably on the lowest level. And as you say, the goal is to raise yourself and to educate yourself so that you don't become somebody else. You're incarnated. That's the deal. But you can raise the level of interpretation of each of your planets and positions so that you become a higher being no matter what sign you are. And that's so that it's not so much becoming something else, but becoming a perfection. Well, it's actually it's actually not a thing you can reach. It's something you're drawn to, and so you're becoming something which is the epitome of your chart and rising above the chart itself. But you have and rise, and therefore you can become more aware of all the outer planets at the same time, which changes your behavior from the normal perception. So I think you said so much in that place. I don't know how to even answer it,
Yeah.
because I think the planets also are affecting the endocrinological system. They're actually sending messages, some sort of chemical message that the pituitary complex is picking up and sending back. So it's a two-way street between us and the planets. I bet if everybody in the whole world got up one morning and stayed in bed and didn't get up, if everybody stayed in bed, if everything would stop moving. All right.
Yeah. But that also reminds me, like all these transits, they're generally happening. I remember you mentioned a transit, something that happened on Facebook. You mentioned this last weekend, some very, difficult Mars opposition. You talked about it on Saturday, I think. But I feel like in that notion as well, these transits also affect everybody differently, depending also first on their natal chart, and secondly, how much work you have already done within yourself, right?
That's correct.
That's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, exactly. I think that is true. That even though you're going to go through that, it's like going through the knothole in a fence. When those aspects happen, like the Mars Saturn was unusually strong last weekend because Mars is weak in Libra and Saturn is strong in Capricorn. So it was a David and Goliath kind of thing, that eventually David will return and Mars will regain strength and come back. But it was a punch, and everybody got the punch. But as you say, if you have been working very hard toward understanding the vibrations and the purpose of them, you're not going to feel as victimized by that punch. Yeah. You'll see that there's justice in every moment, as hard as it is to sometimes see. But I think that you're quite right. I think that's why we even bother. Why would we even bother to know any of this stuff if there wasn't a purpose behind it?
Exactly. That also want to know the listeners, let them know who is new to astrology, or in general, basically, that there are no such thing as good or bad transits or good or bad natal chart, right? It's so subjective. We don't even, our events in our everyday life just, even in the moment something bad happens, but it actually quote unquote leads to something better. I get stuck in this black and white thinking, and Laura, my wife, makes fun of it. Even when I look at astrology, like I feel, any square is bad and only trines are good. So I, so again, not seeing the bigger picture. But again, like there's all the exalted manifestations or the lower manifestations, and it's a whole range, like the range of consciousness, how it can manifest for each individual, right?
I think that's exactly what I always thought. Trines are good, squares are bad. But in a calamity, you want the people with squares around you. You don't want the people with trines around you in a calamitous situation, because they're all standing on a chair because they saw a mouse. But it's the people with all the squares that know where to get the water, where to bury the dead, it's the people with the squares that come alive, even though they're always screaming for rest and peace. All I want is peace and quiet. They couldn't stand it. And the thing is, it's the people with all those squares that do this. They're the ones, the doers in a situation where crisis is happening. Call out the people with the squares, because they're going to know where the food is.
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
But we all dread. Well, we live on a wheel. We live on this wheel of pleasure and pain. So we think, and it's true, the trines give us pleasure, the squares give us pain. Is there any purpose to pain? That's debatable. Some people say there is a reason why you have this, and not just your karma is that. You have this because you have certain abilities that other people don't have. That is the truth about squares, even though people with a lot of squares are a major pain in the neck most of the time. But they're the people who are problem solvers. They see life as a cat's cradle with all kinds of conflicts and contradictions. The trines people don't like contradictions. No. They like things to be smooth, of course, and it's great for them. But it's the people with the squares. The people with the squares don't know what to do with themselves when things are there's too many trines going on.
Interesting. That's a good point. I can see that. And also, I mean, what reminds me of what you said, also quote unquote, human nature of the pursuit of pleasure and avoidance of pain, you know what I mean? Which also creates imbalance and stucking stuff away into the shadow, but pain, quote unquote, and suffering is also part of the friction of the evolution of consciousness to, confront our wounds, our karmic, quote unquote, lessons in all of that.
I was just talking about that this morning. Now, was I talking to someone or was I talking to myself? I can't quite remember. We're all good friends. But I remember I was talking about this morning, and the idea of right now we're under a Scorpio lunation because we're having this conversation at the end of October in 2019. But during a Scorpio lunation, the manifestations are quite different because every single person in the world is now under great pressure from the Saturn-Pluto Jupiter Capricorn South Node thing that everyone's been talking about. So everybody, no matter where you are in life, rich or poor, the rich people still have the same death anxiety as the poor people. It's death anxiety that has now gripped the world. And some things are literally challenging to life, and other things are psychological and emotional and spiritual. But everybody's got this death anxiety right now. And when the pressures get so much, like now, when the earthly worries are so great, practical things, under a Scorpio lunation, it's very easy to turn to the pursuit of obsessive fantasies as a distraction from it. And it works for a while. It tastes great, it feels great, but then you have to come back to reality. So no matter so that as you say, as you've been saying, that everything depends on everything else. So right now there's a great deal of pressure that cannot be escaped. But under a Scorpio lunation, you can slide under the fence and come back before dawn, because there is the issue of finding a distraction and a way to release the tension caused by stress and worry. And Scorpio Taurus is a way to do that. So people do it through food and eating, but it keeps us all alive. It keeps us all alive so that we don't give up hope and that we don't give up in a time when we think we're defeated. Because you know what? When I look in that chart, and I look, and sometimes I have seen charts that I think in my office, I think, geez, could I cope with this? This guy's got to deal with this. Could I cope with this? The thing is, I make it my business to make sure that there are options. That everything that I see, it may not be pleasant, and people know me. They know I'm not always pleasant. But there are always options. You are given that chart to be an inspiration to other people, as also to be inspired by them. So my goal is to help people see what's really happening, show them everything that I can show them, and help them become better at what they do and what they want in life. And keep them laughing while they're doing it.
Yeah, also like it helps with astrology. Even if you look at the natal chart, it shows you how everybody's such a unique individual, and the true self is almost buried there. But we just so then get conditioned, wounded, official culture, society, entertainment. It gets all clouded, but deep inside, you see it in the chart. There's the true self, the true purpose of the soul, so to speak. Right?
Nobody's boring.
Yeah.
Nobody is boring. And the thing is, people have said to me, well, I'm boring. I'm just a normal person. Oh, really? Everybody has a side to them that is an abstract expressionist painting. Some people are figurative, and it's easy to see what makes them happy.
By the way, that's exactly what, remember when you gave me the reading 10 years ago. So when you looked at my chart, you said it looks like a Pollock painting.
It was.
Because it is quite, spread out.
It was, because when you first look at it, you think, just some charts, like your chart, when you look at a chart, you think, what the hell is this supposed to be? And then I think to myself, well, if I can't figure it out, neither can he. So we'll just have to work on it together. But sometimes it is like an abstract painting, and just like you go to a museum and some people would say, what the hell is that? My kid could do that. And when you look at a chart that you think your kid could do, that's full of conflict, full of irony, full of contradictions. How could he be this if he's that? How could he be that if he's this? And I think, well, It's not my job to figure it out. He'll have to figure that out. That's why he's here. And that's why he's coming to my office, to help him identify what this is supposed to be, but not necessarily say, this is a picture of a meadow and then there's a house at the meadow. That's not what it is. Not everybody is born for that. Some people are born for a different kind of search. You obviously were born for a different kind of search, because you're definitely an out-of-towner. You know what I mean?
I can agree with that. Yes, an out-of-towner, exactly. But it's very true. No, that's it's also about these inner. I can see myself these contradictions, all these different eyes. Who am I truly? But this friction, this internal friction, if you own it, that's also leads to the alchemical transformation. I remember you gave me, remember the reading, and it was just a few years before my Uranus opposition. You even said, you didn't make specific prediction, but something like really profound, this area may happen, boom. And it did happen. Had no idea, what I'm doing now. I didn't consciously plan 10 years ago, things like that, and how it has developed. And there were a bit difficult lessons, devastating relationship wise and all of that, but it was almost like necessary karmic lesson to really come to a place of self-empowerment, more connected to my true self. So that's what I meant. Sometimes these devastating experiences, like death experiences, are like in the moment they suck, like I don't want to experience this, but you go through this and you realize, oh, this was a necessary initiation, So on that note, let's jump into the topic you just mentioned. Everybody's talking about the Saturn-Pluto conjunction in 2020 coming up, and I read so many astrologers, people are afraid of it, whatever, threaten it. People see it as talk about it from all different levels. the individual, the political, the global, the spiritual? Are are we going to awaken? Are the aliens going to come? Will they make this control system take more grab of us? What do you see happening?
All those nice things. But I will say this. Every sentient being is now being assailed to raise their consciousness or die. I should say raise their consciousness and die. Because of course there will be many literal death and many goodbyes that he said. That's not necessarily what I mean. It's dying to a whole set of realities in philosophy, in government, in religion. This is wild what's happening. But it's happening, and it makes us ask, what is sentience? I looked it up in all these books. Sentient beings are those beings that are in traditional definition. Sentient beings are beings that can respond subjectively to external stimuli and can solve problems that come up. But I think sentient beings are everywhere, different levels. There was recently a story about a family that was on vacation. I think it was California. I think it was. But they were walking along the shore and they found a little, I think it was a small young one, octopus stuck in the sand as the tide was going out. So they stopped and they dug around it and they liberated the octopus from the sand, and so it could go back into the water. The next morning, they were walking along the same beach, and lo and behold, that little octopus came close to the shore, but stayed in the water and followed them all the way down the beach. And it lasted for a few days more while they were in California, wherever they were. That's gratitude, obviously, being shown. The thing followed them for a while. So you see there is many, many wonderful stories on the net now. I forget the name of the YouTube, but of animals that are responding to other animals as well as human beings. I think I saw a hippopotamus. I think it was a hippo. I can't remember now. Helping a little duckling up a step so it could follow the mother and the other little ducks. First, you thought it was just going to swallow it, but it didn't. It helped it. It helped this little duckling move. So there is a movement afoot, a rise in consciousness, not only land grabbing and killing people. That's not the only thing that's happening. There also is a rise in sentience and the sensitivity to other living beings. That's also happening. We get caught up in the Saturn-Pluto because the Saturn-Pluto is a bitch in the sense that it is a very tough thing to face. Those of us who were alive in 1983, we did it. It wasn't easy, but we did it. This is an especially difficult one because the whole paradigm of what it means to be alive and human on Earth is changing. With the arrival of AI and robots and Alexa and all those things. I was at my nephew's house several months ago in San Diego, and he has Alexa, and it was in the other room. So I said to him, "Does Alexa know everything?" And from the other room, I heard Alexa say, "I don't know everything, but I know some things."
Wow.
Yeah. See, we got to get used to this.
Yeah. On that note, record quick. That's also the dawn. We can get this later, but I'm curious. The dawn of transhumanism ties it also into what we experience with Taurus and Uranus. Uranus and Taurus. I mean, does that tie into transhumanism?
Yeah, I think it's an absolute quantum leap happening at the same time that Haumea and Makemake and Sedna and Eris are being entered into the horoscopes. We don't know exactly what they mean, but that's how people felt about Pluto. The more planets that are discovered, especially now extrasolar planets, we don't even know what horoscope they fit in. We don't even know whether they have a zodiac.
So it just almost resembles also the the quote unquote discovery of new planets expanding also our expanding consciousness. So the planets not only affect us, they also reflect us where we're at, right? In the sense.
Right. They help to define new challenges for the human experience. So, am I going to have a robot in the house? Probably eventually. I've got, if I've got a washing machine, I got a robot in the house. Your toaster is your first robot. Isn't it? I mean,
Sure.
the toaster is your first robot. You say, you put the thing in, you say, make toast, and it makes toast. That's what I told my physics teacher in high school. He said, what is it? Why does a toaster make toast? I said, it's got to be witchcraft or something like that, because you put toast in and then you put bread in and toast turns into toast. That's got to be magic, because magic is what human beings don't understand. And as we expand our consciousness, we can see that there's a reason and ability, and there are human sides and there are non-human sides. And that's what we're facing now, the fact of the challenge of being able to have to relate to non-humans. That's one thing, and in terms of the other out-of-towners we're talking about.
So, yeah. So when is actually the Saturn-Pluto conjunction happening exact, the date?
Well, I'll tell you, but then I'll tell you, don't wait for that date, because by the time the planet, by the time it's exact, it's over. It's like we have a bus driver here in New York. He reminds me of the Saturn-Pluto, because he doesn't tell you the name of the street until the bus is pulling away from the street. And he says, that was 79th Street. And I think, oh, this is the Saturn-Pluto, because by the time it comes, it's over. The thing is that January 12th is supposed to be the exact thing, the exact moment of it. But then there's the Jupiter-Saturn that's going to be all year in 2020. So it's a gradient. It's asymptotic. It's not something that is. People say this is what people want in prediction. When does it happen? How long does it last? Is it good for me?
Exactly.
That's it, right?
Yeah.
So you could actually be really cosmic and just say to everybody in the first 5 minutes, well, you're going to die. Not immediately, but eventually. That's all there is to it. So you can look at these in a very dismal way that way and say, well, what am I bothering for? But the thing is that everything that happens is developing your ability to cope with it and to become wise and inspiring to other people, and to also inspire yourself. But the Saturn-Pluto, January 12th, it's supposed to be over. But it's not like a heat wave that we say, oh, yeah, that was terrible. That was 5 days of over 40 degrees. It's not like that. It's by the time it happens, you have been changed. You're cooked.
Okay. So that's also, even with these transits, especially the slow moving planets, you feel it's already coming. It's like, it's not like, a moon, whatever transit you feel for a day or a few hours and then it's over, gone. It's like you said, it's the build up, and then it will also, the after effects after you mentioned, you already changed, and then you got to deal with that.
You got to deal with that. And the thing is, then you say the moon thing, what about your birth process? The birth process is, I think, one of the great challenges of life. It's your first goodbye to your mother. It's the birth process, what the moon did during the labor and afterwards. If you were born through labor, that's an emotional tone for the rest of your life.
Yeah,
because it's your first encounter with death. Leaving the womb is like death, and it is showing people what really was the first contact and separation they had from the protective womb. So of course that moon thing lasts your whole life. Every month your moon is in the same position it was when you were born, so you unconsciously experience it. That's the basis of all my work. The earlier that the transits happen, the more deeply embedded they are in the unconscious, and the less likely they are to get through cognitive therapy. You can't reach them. That's why I got involved in unconscious communication, because if things happen really early and they're very prolonged, like if you have a very prolonged aspect in very first 5 years of life, those things are going to remain on your unconscious truth. and you're going to be acting them out all the time. The more that therapy can bring out your repetition, your unconscious repetition of those memories, the easier it is to free yourself from them.
Interesting. So that makes sense that the birth experience itself is actually a death experience, because you're separated from your mother from this cozy womb inside and then thrown into this world, mostly violently
Yeah, and
by
this I got
doctors.
into. Yeah, really, and yeah, and I got into this aspect of my work by meeting a psychiatrist who I believe was a smart. He was the man. He said I always call him the man who killed Freud, because he had really gone beyond Freudian psychoanalysis in his work. And he was very criticized by many. His name was Robert Langs. He was criticized by many psychiatrists, good psychiatrists, who were very against it, because he believed that the psychiatrist was also being unconsciously monitored by the patient. But many psychiatrists couldn't take that, because they blamed everything on the childhood. And he believed that the patient, let's call him the client, had also as many accurate perceptions as distorted. And that was the gift, was to be able to release those accurate perceptions of the therapy, which are unconscious. So that I've been working on that and trying to develop that in my astrological practice since 1975, when I met him. So it's 25. Is that 39 years?
Something like that. Yeah. Yeah.
It's 1975 is 39 years ago. Yeah, I was
No,
5.
that's it's longer than that. I was born 72. I'm 47. That's more than that. Yeah. It's over 40
It
years.
is 25 and 20 is 45 years. Yeah, I was 5
yeah.
years old. Yeah, I was 5 years old.
There you go. No, but it's true. Even if you know nowadays that the first 3 or 4, up to 5 years really set the stage for the rest of your life. And like my wife Laura, she works with somatic therapy and all of, and also somatic therapy, tuning into the body, because a lot of the trauma we experience, we cannot even consciously remember and process via talk therapy. There needs to be, a deeper process, but the body holds score. But again, like a lot of the wounding and trauma we experience happen in the first 4 or 5 years, which correlates to what you said. Those transits may have reflected that or affected it as well.
And when you think about aspects that are exact and partile at birth, that's the horse you rode in on. That's part of your makeup. It's what we call your product feature, and that's what you have to embrace. If you're born with something exact, that's in your chemistry. And there's a genetic level, a historical level, a psychological level, an interactional level, and a spiritual level. All those 6 levels have to be identified in doing a horoscope. That's what I try to do.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I don't just say you have the moon here and the Venus. I remember my friend Jeff Jower, who was a wonderful astrologer. He's no longer with us. But Jeff always said, don't forget to mention the planets, because there's magic in the name. So I try to always remember that, and not just wipe out references to planetary transformation, because I think it's important too. And I get that from Jeff. I never forget that, because sometimes it's like people will say, did you read my chart at all? Sometimes I'm so into translating the planets into their life that I forget to mention them.
Yeah, but it also shows you this using astrology that you're able to say that, and not just mechanically repeat definitions of certain constellations and whatnot.
But I did that in my earlier years. I used to put the chart up on the wall. I used to make huge charts and put them on the wall, and then there would be 2 seats. We would sit comfortably staring at the chart, and I would read the chart to the persons. I thought that's how I started out. And they were very good for what they were, and that they were defining and diagnosing what behavior I saw.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing was, I lost a client to suicide in the early 70s. And I didn't recognize the signs, because I was too into Saturn and Mars. I was too into the definitions without recognizing the signs and behavior. And that's when I realized, you know what? I need more training. Astrology is great, but I'm not doing my job, which is to identify and to heal the best that I can.
Yeah.
And that's why I got into what I got into. I fell into this communicative psychoanalytic psychotherapy, and it filled the bill for me, and it helps to flesh out horoscope interpretation.
So that's interesting, because you mentioned at the beginning that you looked at different systems. Did you look a little bit into Vedic astrology? I've never gotten a Vedic astrology reading. My wife has, but it's very predictive. They even predict your death and all of that. But Western astrology is not that predictive, right? That's the
But people want predictions.
exactly.
They want predictions because they'll say, you'll go through a whole wonderful reading about their karma and their path and everything. And then they'll say, what do you see for January? Because people think that that's what astrology is. And they'll say, what about that earthquake? Did you predict it? If you didn't predict it, what's the use of astrology? They don't really see that, but you have to include the ability that you are climbing up to the top of the tree and you're looking to the edge of the forest. Mm-hmm. You have to show them that that's possible without giving all the power to the future, because then it makes people think they'll just wait for the thing to happen.
And
but you can't.
They're also probability. It's just probabilities in this sense, right?
Because it's probabilities.
If you just
unless they could all be true, maybe.
Yeah.
In a quantum universe, we're happy.
Yeah. So that's interesting. Now I want to just go before we go big into the bigger trends that's happening right now or coming up. What you said about reading a chart and then childhood. So I'm curious, a little bit about my work. So I talk about, especially there's a lot of research out there about psychopaths, genetic psychopathy, as I call it. A lot of Dr. Robert Hare has wrote a book, Without Conscience. There's more research coming up that a psychopath defined as somebody who has no conscience, literally no capacity to feel love, compassion, and they feel very different, literally feel themselves as separate from normal humanity. But genetic psychopathy is people who are literally born without a conscience. It's not necessarily related to wounding within childhood growing up, right? Which you most feel like pathological individuals develop from that. Can you read in a chart if somebody is potentially actually a psychopath? That's what I've always wondered, because when we read charts, maybe we always assume that everybody has the same capacity for love, emotions, and their transits affect them.
I think you have to know the person.
Yeah.
Because I've known situations that are so terrible in infancy that they carry that wound with them all the time. Mm-hmm. That does not necessarily mean they're going to be devoid of humanity. That's what you have to watch the human behavior and see. You can't know that from looking at the natal chart. Right. That would be cursing somebody.
Yeah.
But I will say that if you encounter behavior, I remember someone who died quite young. He was a very nice young fellow, and he had one of the most difficult charts I ever saw. You could probably say he would not form any normal relationships. He was a very nice guy, actually, but he had a tough family thing. He died at 37 years old. But if you look at a natal chart, you see all kinds of possibilities. Experiencing the person will tell you where they have gone and where the development has been hampered or stopped. At that point, the Buddhists in Tibetan medicine, Terry Clifford had wrote a book. There are many books on Tibetan medicine and psychiatry, but one belief is some people, the medicine for them is compassion. And they have gone to a certain place that they will not solve that problem in this particular incarnation. So you have to develop compassion at a distance. Your objectivity counts. And if you can identify the behavior that you call psychopathy, if it's psychopathic behavior and it's dangerous, you have to stand back, look through a telescope, and still seek to develop compassion for that person, and hope that in the next round, the next movie, the person will remember that little bit of compassion you gave them. So sometimes the healing medicine, just like in regular medicine, is not going to help any case that's too advanced. Whether it's spiritual illness or physical illness, the person must go through what they have to go through. But if they can realize that you have to administer that medicine with compassion and wisdom, they will have a better chance in the next round of not repeating that behavior. But I can never personally be comfortable saying someone's a psychopath by looking at a horoscope.
No, that's fair enough. That makes sense. But also, yeah, compassion from a distance without falling into blind compassion. You know, that thing of
that's seductivity of a sociopath.
Yeah. Or what the Buddhists call idiot compassion, right?
Yes,
you don't make your boundaries clear.
You have to make the boundaries clear. I try to keep very, very good boundaries. I try very hard to keep boundaries. And that's part of the method of psychiatry that I have been working on, is actually keeping the framework very strict, because individuals who have been raised in a chaotic environment will never want to keep a framework. They're always going to want to probably usurp the boundaries. Mm-hmm. So being very conscious of what those boundaries are is vital in terms of proper therapeutic connection. Mm-hmm. But that's true. There's compassion and there's compassion. There are people that I can't feel compassion for. There are a couple of cases, not my personal clients, but certain criminals that have done things that I think I can't get it. I just can't get it. But mostly that I feel sorry for people who've been in positions of great power and wealth and fame and love and destroy everything. What's happening right now in the world is that you have a usurping of power. Capricorn is always involved with power and its potential to abuse it. And it always in the world involves what they call eminent domain. Do you know what that term is?
No, what does it mean?
It means that the government can take your property because they're going to build a highway through your house.
Yeah. I think that's what's happening right now, and we can get into this deep in a second now, but with all the fires in Northern California, you know.
That's what Columbus did. Columbus got here and said to the natives, "Wow, this place is beautiful. Get out."
Exactly, because literally what he said, there have been plans of the superhighway through Northern California, and you know, what
we don't know. It could be all about real estate.
Yes, we talked about
buying up. People are going to flee California now, and that's going to be perfect for real estate developers. It could be that. Could be that. I'm not saying it is. Could be anything, but Capricorn is always about living on the edge of the danger of usurping the power. I wish I could show you this picture, but I don't see how I could do it on this thing. There's a picture that I will show you when we finish it at the end. So I'll show you this picture of what I see Saturn and Capricorn being about. It's about being on the edge of destruction and being very high up in power at the same time. And that's been a history of going on, but we've never had something as strong as this Saturn in our lifetime, certainly, of Saturn, Pluto, Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto on their own south nodes. And Mars is going to, of course, be there too. We haven't had that particular. We've lived through Saturn, Pluto. 9/11, I think, was Saturn opposition Pluto, and 1983, 82, 83 was a conjunction at 29 Libra. So we've lived, and 1948, the beginning of Israel, which was Saturn, Pluto in Leo. So Israel will be in anything that time. Anytime a planetary configuration repeats itself, you have the issues come up again. So now this will be a big issue in terms of Israel and Palestine coming back up, because it was 1948 that they conjoined each other before. And I think they conjoined each other in 1985 during the AIDS epidemic. I think they also did. Or it was hovering right near there, because it took place in 83, but it was hovering in Scorpio with the South Node for a long time during the AIDS epidemic.
Interesting. Yeah, so we are at the end of the first hour. There's a lot more to
You're kidding.
talk. It goes
We
fast.
just
Yeah,
started.
we just started, but I'm looking forward in the second hour. Definitely want to go deep into what you just said. Definitely, let's look deep into Saturn-Pluto conjunction Capricorn. That also relates to what's happening the South Node in Capricorn, the North Node in Cancer, right? And maybe I would like to look what you also. I know you're very good at an expertise in the astrology of the U.S. and what's happening there, the natal chart and how it's affecting the U.S. And I definitely wanted to get into what you call the occultation of Saturn Pluto and what does it mean in the bigger picture. And my work, I know your work. I want to look deeper into the so-called New World Order, what's happening there in light of astrology, and also with regards to the topic of all topics we hinted at, the otherworldly, UFOs, alien contact, disclosure possible in light of astrology, and all of that.
Disclosure happened in July of 1947.
Okay, I know what you're hinting at.
That was disclosure, and the end of the world as we know it ended in 1945 with Hiroshima.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see that. But let's go deep into that in the second hour, and then see.
We'll solve everything.
And then
solve. And there won't be anything to
exactly.
do. What are we going to do after?
Excellent, Michael. Thank you so much. And again, the second hour is for members of Piercing the Veil of Reality. If you haven't signed up yet, go to my website, veilofreality.com. You can sign up there for the second hour and also have access to the membership forum. And again, Michael Lutin, he's reachable at his website, michaellutin.com. He has also a great Facebook page. And he has also really appreciate you give a lot of updates of current events, current transits, and how it affects. Very insightful, very inspirational, and also want to thank you. You have helped me a lot in my own life as well. Most often being able to laugh about myself, that helps a lot. Not taking yourself too serious. Very important in this day and age. And yeah, we'll be right back.